Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis, what a crazy Wednesday in the double murder trial for Alec Murdaugh. We're going to get to that in just a second. Real quick, the formalities and the thank yous to Mary and Katie Taco and Mom who donated. I appreciate you guys so much. Just very generous of you. Song fact of the day, Don't Stop Believing. So great song, right? Everybody sings it at the top of their lungs when it comes on. And so the line strangers waiting up and down the boulevard, it's a reference to Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood where dreams are made. But the keyboard player, Jonathan Cain, was starting to doubt he could make it as a musician in Hollywood. So what does he do? Talks to his dad. And so he asked, should I just come back to Chicago and give up on this? And his dad said, no, son, stay the course. We have a vision. Don't stop believing. So he kind of gelled the advice his dad gave into the observations he had of all the creative types that were walking up and down Sunset Boulevard. So there you go. Now you know. Okay. So the obvious. So yeah, we had a bomb threat today. We were in the middle of testimony, just normal day. And you hear like a police radio go off, which is something you never hear in that courtroom at all. First time I've ever heard it. So the judge sends the jury out. And then as soon as they're out of the door shut, he stands up, tells us we all have to evacuate. And so I was kind of first at the door and they stopped us and let the family go out first. And then we all went out. We were out there, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours at least. I was on the phone with Law and Crime Network pretty much most of that time, but we were unable to go get our stuff because we had to move across the street from the courthouse where our tent is set up right on the sidewalk near the courthouse. So I couldn't get my coffee. I couldn't get my backpack and I couldn't get my little earpiece. So I couldn't go live. So I was on the phone with Joseph Scott Morgan, who in fact, in just a little bit, he and I are going to be guests on a podcast together. I'll put that link out when we're done. And anyways, it was a crazy day. We go in, restart testimony, and then just early, Judge Newman says we're done for the day. So forgive me if this lags a bit, but what I have found is having to come home and type all these notes is taking me hours. So I'm just going off my handwritten notes. I tried to make it to where I could read it, but we're just going to jump in real quick. The first witness was Megan Fletcher, was back on the stand from yesterday. She's the gunshot residue expert. She's actually a forensic scientist, and she is under cross-exam. And it was just kind of the basic questions you would expect, like gunshot primer residue is not biodegradable. No, it'll stay on surfaces indefinitely until it's wiped off, like on that rain jacket specifically. So and then one point that he mentioned is we've seen witnesses in this courtroom hold up firearms. Is it possible that you have gunshot residue in that chair? And she said yes. And he asked if she knew if the clothes were collected wet. And she said the shoes and the shirt were damp. And he asked, did you smell laundry detergent? And she said yes. And he asked if she was aware it had rained that night. And she said no. So talking about the particles found on the shirt and shorts and none on the shoes. So if he had held that shotgun in his hand that he went and got after discovering the bodies, that could explain that amount there. So he also points out that she told the agent, and I believe he said at 3 a.m. that the number of particles on Alec's hands was consistent with transfer and asked if she stood by that. And she said yes. So on the seatbelt, kind of the same thing. The result was one particle on the red piece that you press to let yourself out of the seatbelt. And you can't say how or when it was deposited. No, she can't. And they would go shooting. He points out he'd had the car a couple of years. It's possible that that was transferred before the murders. So onto the rain jacket, which was sort of the big deal. There's no way to know when that gunshot primer residue was deposited. And unless it's cleaned off, it would stay on there. So it was found in September of 2012 at Mr. Randolph Murdaugh and Miss Libby's house. And he says if he had taken, meaning Mr. Randolph, had taken off the poncho and threw it on top of a dirty shotgun, could it transfer the 38 particles or 35? And she says yes. And he said, you said 38 is a significant amount. And she's, she pretty much said more than you would expect if it didn't come in contact with a gun or being in the vicinity of a gun being fired. He asked if one particle is insignificant, and she said it's a particle of gunshot residue, and she can't say it's insignificant. She was a great witness, by the way, just throwing that out there. And then he mentions the blue tarp, and they did not test that tarp, by the way. So talking about the rain jacket, it was balled up, and she said that the tarp was folded up in a box, and she documented the gun was in contact with the rain jacket, and she said that was a possibility. So he asked, where's the blue tarp? She says, I don't know. She doesn't know if prints were taken off the raincoat. And what happens in a situation like this is when you have something that, like a t-shirt that may have gunshot residue, they get that first in the trace evidence lab to be able to do those tests, because that stuff can come off. So they get it first, and then it's sent down the line for DNA requests and things like that. There was a DNA request on the jacket. Maybe we will hear about that when the DNA expert comes up. So the size, she said it was a large, and the brand name she was not familiar with. She had to look it up. They didn't really tell us what the brand name was, or if they did, I didn't hear it. But it's 52 total particles on the jacket. And so the state says it's a possibility that the gun came in contact with the jacket, and also reiterates it's unusual for 38 gun particles to be found on the inside of that rain jacket. And she said, yes, it is. And so the prosecution asked, with 38 particles inside, is it consistent with being recently fired? And she said, yes. So on recross, they say there's a whole lot of possibilities of what could have happened. And she says, yes. And he asks if a rimfire gun produces gunshot residue. And she said it depends on the type of ammunition used. So we go to Annette Griswold. You're right. You heard that right. Griswold. And that's Eric. Lord have mercy in heaven, y'all. It's been a day. Not only did we have the bomb threat when we were waiting in line to get back in, a lady got overcome by the heat because it's hot down here in the low country today. Thank goodness. I'd rather be hot than cold, but went to the concrete. She was okay. I saw her up in the courtroom. Thank goodness. But Annette Griswold is Alec's paralegal. She got the job in 2012. She was at the firm for 9 years, and she was basically hired to handle Alec's larger cases, like wrongful death suits, that kind of thing. And then there was another paralegal who would work the smaller cases. She said as a boss, he was intelligent when it came to law. He did not keep normal hours. They would joke that he would show up at 5 p.m. and come in like a Tasmanian devil, ready to work. So, but she also said after the boat case, he was a little bit more distant, and it was always hard to get him to sit and sign off for things because he was always moving. But after the crash, he kept his door closed a lot, and he was on the phone a lot. So he would come in. He was not normal. He was tense. You could tell that the boat crash was consuming him, and she said it almost felt like he had his booty on his shoulders, because he would come in and kind of yell their names, treat them different than he had in the past. He didn't like people in his office, by the way. He would come in and say, who's been in my office? Is that more of a guilty conscience, or really just not liking people in there? But he asked her to put Forge on a disbursement sheet. He told her not Forge Consulting. He said Forge Consulting and Forge. That he was wanting it was an umbrella company underneath Forge Consulting, which we know is a lie. So when a case is settled, she starts a deduction sheet to begin taking away those expenses. Now, during that process, Alec can make changes to that sheet. And then once it's all settled, it goes to the accounts payable for a check to be cut. So if the accounts payable made a check to Forge Consulting, they'd have to change it because she'd ask if she should mail it to Michael Gunn. And he would say, I'm meeting him halfway. We're going to dinner. He's coming over to hang out or whatever. And so she started making notes of every time that Alex said he was going to hand deliver this stuff to Michael Gunn, who works for Forge Consulting, because ultimately she thought he would lose the check because she said he would do that. Sounds like we know where Paul gets his forgetfulness from. But in late 2020, she was working from home because she had some surgery. And she noticed that there was a disbursement to Forge that caught her attention. So on December 15th, she got a call from the accounts payable and said she got a disbursement sheet that made no sense to this other employee. And she thought it was odd this person was drafting disbursement. But so the witnesses emailed the documentation, and it tells the attorney fees and amount going to Forge, which Alec had never done. So she talked to Alec, and he asked, why did she call you? And she said, Nicole isn't used to doing this. And so Alec said, I'll take care of it. Alec said he could structure attorney fees to draw interest. And she said at the time that just made sense to her. This was the Hirschberger case, by the way. The matter went away really with his explanation because she trusted him. So on January of 2021, she had left early. I believe her dad was in bad health, and an exact repeat of the December incident happened. And it had some wording the other had. So she and Nicole wanted more information. So Alec and Nicole talked, and the check was written and put into that fake Forge. So the Thomas More case, this was all funds routed to Forge. That was the attorney fees and the client money. So both times this happens, she's out of the office. The money should have stayed until workers' comp is settled because that takes time. There's usually liens and outstanding things you have to pay off. So she was starting to see these red flags. She said in hindsight, one thing too is this would be typically done like right before the day should end at 5. And she said in hindsight, sitting it over 10 minutes before 5 o'clock, it'll get done quickly. No questions asked. Nobody's going to take a triple look at it, just ready to go home. And she's asked why the funds were deposited without workers' comp being settled. And Alex said he did that to draw interest for the client and the firm. And I believe that was $425,000. So also on the Ferris case, there was a bench trial in Columbia in January of 2021. She actually attended this paralegal on the stand. Ms. Griswold attended that. There were also 2 co-counsels on that case. And so Chris Wilson ultimately was the one that got Alec involved in this Ferris case. So the judge ruled in favor of Alec. The incoming money would go to Chris Wilson's office. So she got together the expenses, and Alec emailed Chris Wilson. And they were told the money would be dispersed by Chris Wilson's office. And she expected documentation signed by the client. And then they get 4 separate checks. So in May, she got the settlement package, but only 2 expense reimbursements. And so she emailed them, when do we expect the attorney fees? And the reply was that Alec had been paid. So she said she was shocked. Actually found out he was paid in March. And so she asked accounts payable, and they didn't have checks on the books for that. So she thought he lost it. So she asked Alec about it, and he said, I didn't get checks. And so they went back and forth with Chris Wilson's office. And Alec said Chris has the funds and that Vicky was wrong. So this poor girl, because she's on top of her game, you could tell she knows her job like the back of her hand. So It confused her because she knew those funds belonged to the firm, the attorney fees, and she knew it never should have been made out to him. And then she asked, "Are you sure?" And so this person named Vicky had a light bulb moment and said, "Yeah, that's kind of odd." A couple of days, she still asks about it, but just she had that little red flag raised in the back of her mind that this is wrong. So eventually, she emailed Miss Seckinger, who testified yesterday, and they looked through all these printouts. And she said Miss Seckinger was on high alert, and it didn't really look good at this point as far as what they were starting to see. And so Miss Seckinger said she would ask Alec about it, and she kept that paperwork that she brought to show Miss Seckinger. May 27th, Miss Seckinger emails her what she needed as far as documentation. And the witness forwarded it to the paralegal for Chris Wilson, who was on vacation. There was a little bit of a delay. Several days later on June 2nd, there was a response there was another email where she requested this information again. And she replied she didn't know about this and forwarded that email to Chris Wilson. So his paralegal says, I'm clueless. And she said ultimately her and Miss Seckinger wanted to be wrong and just put this behind them. But she had told Vicky she was very stressed because of this. And the witness's daughter overheard her and said, "Get your resume ready because he's going to fire you." In other words, if she's probing into this, her daughter's like, he's going to get rid of you. So on June 7th, when Miss Seckinger went to Alec's office to talk to him, she walked past Miss Griswold and didn't say anything. And she said he tends to work evenings. And so she left at 5:15 and Alec was still there. So we know that's the night of the murder. She slept through some texts and was woken up in the middle of the night, sees all these text messages. And then there is a voicemail from Randy Murdaugh. And it says, "Call me, doesn't matter what time." She said he was upset. And he said it's bad. It's real bad. And really, she thought Randolph had died because if you remember, his health had deteriorated that same day that he was confronted about the money. So that was her first thought. You would never think Maggie and Paul. But he said Maggie and Paul were killed. And she asked where Alec and Buster were because she was worried. We know that as a busy parent, you don't have time to completely overhaul your life in the new year. One change that's easy to make that will make your life easier in 2023 is Little Spoon. Most of the baby and kid foods at the grocery store is heavily processed and often on the shelf longer than your little one has been in this world. Not cool, and not the quality nutrition our kids deserve. Little Spoon makes everything fresh, organic, and uses absolutely nothing artificial. It's just like homemade, all delivered to your door and ready in seconds. From baby food to big kid, Little Spoon has you covered for years. Little Spoon even hides vegetables and chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, and more. Their smoothies come in pouches that make on-the-go snack easy, healthy, and tasty. And yes, I tried one. They're great. Did I mention it comes right to your door? It's flexible, easy, and everything stores in the refrigerator or freezer. You can pick your menu for a variety of foods to introduce to your child. The price is right, the quality is unmatched, so make this year's chaos a little more manageable with time-saving, delicious, and healthy meals and snacks your kids will love. Go to littlespoon.com and enter my code WhatTheWorld at checkout to get 50% off your first Little Spoon order. That's littlespoon.com and enter WhatTheWorld for 50% off at checkout. I love Thrive Market. I've been able to find brands not widely seen in stores that are much cheaper than other places online. I've been using their Foy CBD relief cream for my knee with amazing results. And this is just one example of the many products you can find to better your life, from foods to beauty to health. As a Thrive Market member, I can save money on every single order. And on average, I save 30%. On my last order, I saved $93. On top of the massive savings on each order, Thrive Market has a deals page that changes every day. It gives me cash back on many brands, and they have a price match guarantee. You can search dietary restriction using filters, and even better, they help a family in need with their 1-for-1 membership matching program. You join, they give. Join Thrive Market today and get 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. Go to thrivemarket.com/whattheworld for 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's Thrive, THRIVE market.com/whattheworld, thrivemarket.com/what. So she knew Paul, Maggie, and Buster. And she said there were two different reactions by the staff when the murder happened. It was scared. And also just they were protective of Alec and Randy because they would even watch for strange cars that would go up and down the road, things like that. And she said they were in, quote, mama bear mode, end quote. So, you could tell these girls really cared about him. The fees were the furthest thing from her mind until September. And before the murders, but after the boat crash, there was backlash in the community against all the Murdaughs. And she said Mallory was actually her dad's first cousin. So September 2nd, Ms. Griswold's looking for a file and couldn't find it. So she goes to Alec's office. She found it, picked it up, and she said a check floated to the ground like a feather. And she saw the check from the Ferris case written to Richard Alec Murdaugh, and that was dated March with attorney fees on the check. So she knew he lied. He did that by mobile deposit. She said she went back to her desk. She was very hurt, very angry. And she told Miss Seckinger she had found the Ferris check. And so she showed her. So Miss Seckinger ran a report and another attorney was calling Michael Gunn. So she found issues and started realizing we got stolen funds here. So the next day, Alec was fired. So on September 26th of 21, Alec was in rehab and sent a text to Miss Griswold and Christy while in rehab. Christy was the other paralegal, by the way. The jury was sent out. They argue about the text coming in, but ultimately the judge let it in. The defense was a little bit worried because they're raising the fact that he was in rehab, but Chris Wilson, I believe somebody testified already. I believe it was Chris Wilson. It'll be testimony they hear eventually about him being on pills, but I didn't get the whole text. If I can find it, I will tweet it out or put it on social media. So he says he's getting better every day. He says he's been worried about them and he's sorry he didn't get to tell y'all myself. I know both of you have been hurt by me and I know it sounds hollow, but I'm truly sorry. The worst part is knowing I did the most damage to those I love the most. So they played the kennel video. She 100% is certain that's Alec's voice on there. Again, that's very damaging because according to Alec, he wasn't there. So on cross, Alec encouraged you to take care of your dad when he was sick. And she said she loved Alec, but he was hard to work for sometimes because he was so erratic. And she also said Alec just didn't know how to say no to people. That was a word he did not know the meaning of. And so Griffin points out that Alec would schedule appointments around family time. Like if Buster or Paul had a sports game or something, he would take time for that. And she says yes. She said Maggie was thoughtful and would do things for like her birthday and stuff. And the defense pointed out Alec and Maggie traveled together a lot of time for his conferences, and they would also bring the boys to a lot of those. So they asked about the relationship between Alec and Maggie's family, and she said it was close. And he was front and center in the media spotlight after the murders. She said there were cameras outside the law firm. All the buzz was about Alec. And he was grieving. And she said, but after the murders, he was more mellow. So instead of yelling, he would stop by their desks, ask if they were okay. He spent a lot of time with Maggie's family after the murders. And she also mentioned that he and Buster would come to the upstate some too. And Alec did not spend another night at Moselle after the murders, by the way. Jim Griffin, the defense attorney, brought that up. He would stay with family. He would stay in Somerville with Maggie's family, and they said Greenville sometimes. So then Jim Griffin points out that Alec didn't fire her like her daughter thought, but Alec got fired, and it's kind of like, well, yeah, but he kind of did some bad stuff. So on redirect after the murders, Alec still had his job and his law license, and you trusted him. She said, yes. She said, when I found the check, I knew he stole and lied to me. And you could tell that the hurt with her, it's more hurt than anger, to where Miss Seckinger, I think she could go 10 rounds bare-fisted with Mr. Murdaugh right now. But next witness, Michael Gunn from Forge Consulting. And they're a settlement planning firm. They help money last a long time, essentially. And so the structured settlement puts money in an annuity, and it's paid like a paycheck, but it's tax-free and it has interest. So annuities are funded by paying insurance companies or the defendant. Attorney fees can be structured. We know that Mr. Crosby said he did that once. It's a similar process for attorneys and client funds, but he also said Alec never met a stranger, and he worked with the firm on a lot of cases. Only 5 cases with Alec, though. Mostly worked with other partners in that firm. And he said Alec was the president for the Association of Justices, so they saw each other there too. When they were at these conferences, they would go golfing, have dinner in Hilton Head. He said they golfed together maybe 15 times. He had never been to Moselle. He had never personally taken a check from Alec or anything like that. And he said Alec inquired about how structuring fees work. So he kind of Mr. Gunn explained the mechanics of how it works. So we're going to fast forward to September of 2021. He got a call from Mr. Cope and asked if he could trust him. And so he says, of course. And he asks if he can give these names of potential clients to check on. In other words, these ones that are going into the fake Forge account, right? So they checked, didn't find any of those clients. The next day, they gave another list. There was only one client that actually was part of Forge Consulting, the real Forge, and that was Dion Martin. He was asked if they used Bank of America. He said they had not for 4 to 5 years. We know this fake Forge account was a Bank of America account. So he found out early morning on the 8th about the murders and made calls to people, reached out to the law partners to offer condolences, and he said he waited a day to call Alec. He met Paul and Maggie. Didn't really know Paul super well, but he knew Maggie. And he said when Buster was in college in Columbia, Maggie would oftentimes reach out and ask, where's the best place for him to get his hair cut or to get some pants tailored and that kind of thing. So he was more familiar with Maggie. He went to the funeral, and afterwards, Alec told him that Maggie loved him and his wife a lot. He saw Alec in Hilton Head in August at the lawyer convention. They hung out a bit, went to dinner with him and some partners, but they showed the check to the fake Forge account, and he said it's not ours. So on cross-exam, they talked about the meeting in Columbia 2 times a year. Maggie would come, and this was really just centered around a family man. Alex and Maggie came to this guy's wedding, to Mr. Gunn's wedding, and it was, I believe, up north, and they had 3 feet of snow, so it was delayed. And he spent a little time with Alec and Maggie, and he said his wife and Alec's wife, Maggie, became friends, and they would keep in touch, but they really didn't hang out unless it was at conventions. It's not like they traveled to see each other. So talking about bringing the boys to the conventions, and he said, yeah, Alec was a family man. They went to the funeral, and then after that went to Moselle. He said the demeanor was Alec was a broken man, and he was very upset. A few months later, he saw Alec at a convention, and John Marvin was there, who's not a lawyer, and he thinks Buster, and people were just trying to lift him up there. So this is, clearly before all of it broke loose. The next witness, I'm going to see if I can get this name. If you're new to the podcast, I'm very famous for butchering names, but this is Brian Hudak, I believe. If not, I'm sorry, sir. But he is a special agent with computer crimes with SLED. And so essentially they took out the infotainment console and the OnStar in Alex's 2021 Suburban. They didn't have the tools to deal with it, so they sent it to the FBI. So our next witness here's another one, y'all. I'm sorry, Dwight Falafowski. So he's an automotive forensic specialist, and he can extract data off of our stuff in our cars, cell phones, all that stuff. So all this comes in binary form, which is a bunch of zeros and ones. And then they have software that kind of puts it in human form. And so when they accessed the data, they found out it was encrypted, which was not normal, but they made clear this was not encrypted by Alec. So they actually had to develop this team had to develop a tool to extract the encryption key. You have to have an encryption key to be able to get to that data. It took a whole year, y'all. 1 year. So once accessed, he found a few things. Okay, so it tells when the phone's linked. It tells call logs, Bluetooth, the state of the vehicle when the doors open, close, whether it's in or out of park. Not a whole lot of the data that's stored is useful, but he was able to kind of figure it out. So they got an identical 2021 Suburban vehicle, and they used that one to extract data to understand how it stored things. So I have to give a shout out to Kathy Russin from Law and Crime, because I totally used her tweet to help me fill in some gaps, because she integrated Maggie's cell phone usage to what they found. So let's go through it. 9:03 and 44 seconds on the night of the murders, the SUV system starts up. Now, it could have occurred just by the door being opened. Doesn't mean it's moving, but that system boots up. You know, when you open your door and if you have a screen, it kind of comes on. So at 9:04 and 23 seconds, there is a missed call from Alec to Maggie. 9:06 and 12 seconds, the orientation changes on Maggie's cell phone. 9:06 and 14 seconds, that's not even a second later, it's like 0.2 seconds later, there's a missed call from Alec to Maggie. 9:06 and 49 seconds, the SUV cranks up. 9:06 and 50 seconds, 1 second later, it's taken out of park. 9:06:51, 1 second after it's taken out of park, he calls Maggie. 9:07 to 9:31, there's a gap there. The screen's off on her car. So at 9:08 and 51 seconds, Alex texts Maggie, going to check on mom, be right back. So 9:22 and 45 seconds, the SUV is put back in park. So the distance to, I'm gonna have to pull out my little sheet here. So the time it would have taken to get to his mom is about 16 minutes. So that's about a 16-minute drive. I Google mapped it. That's about right. So that's part of that timeline. And then at 9:43:05, the SUV is taken out of park. What was the duration? He stayed at mom's 21 minutes within that time frame that Miss Shelley testified about, and not 30 to 40. But get this, 9:43:59. So this is 54 seconds later, the SUV goes back into park. So, I mean, it was out of park for less than a minute. We don't know if the vehicle actually moved, but yeah, that's suspicious. At 9:44, the SUV goes out of park again. 10 p.m., SUV back into park. So it was another 16-minute commute, obviously back to Moselle from his mom's house. 10:01 and 17 seconds, the SUV goes out of park. 10:01 and 29 seconds, 12 seconds later, it goes into park. So then at 9:01 and 30 seconds, that's not even a second later, out of park, goes back into park 13 seconds later. And then at 10:04, the SUV goes out of park, and 10:05:55, the SUV goes back into park after a little more than a minute, which could fit driving from the main house to the kennels. I mean, maybe. At 10:11:45, the SUV goes out of park. And then at 10:12:38, back into park. That's just under a minute. So from the time that I think he gets to the kennels, which is 10:05, you've got 6 minutes before that car goes back into park. 6 minutes. So from where Paul and Maggie were laying, it doesn't make sense to me that it would take 6 minutes to, even if you're rolling them over and checking for pulses, 6 minutes is like, if you see two bodies in that condition, I'm confused why it would take 6 minutes to put your car back in and go, maybe at 10:39, that's when he gets to the main house to get the shotgun. So you've got a minute that it takes him to drive up there, maybe a little less. There's no log indicating when the last time that car went into park. And sometimes it's just the system stops recording and there's just literally no explanation for it. So yeah, the fire, I mean, the bomb threat today was just very interesting. And so what happened was jury's taken out. Judge says, leave. We have to evacuate. Family is let out. We all go down, very calm, very orderly. The staff there at the courthouse took good care of us, telling us not to hurt each other, don't trample each other. Let's not cause a domino effect down the stairs, apparently. Somebody says, well, if we get hurt, there's lawyers everywhere, which was a great light little moment in the midst of kind of what's going on. But we all going down the stairs were like, probably a bomb threat, probably some moron at home that has nothing better to do. And so it was very active. I was on the phone with Law and Crime for over an hour just watching things. But eventually we saw the prosecutors go in and then started letting the public back in, do this testimony, and then it is cut short again, cut short before 5. So that was really all the testimony we had. It was not a long day, but I thought it was interesting how some of these times do line up of him leaving Moselle and getting to Mom's, but you got that 21 minutes that car was in park before it was taken out of park. So Miss Shelley, her timing was about right on the money. And then you've got this time at the house where still that 6 minutes is a little confusing to me, but hey, I'm confused a lot. It's not surprising, right? Hopefully tomorrow we'll get into some more of this. That witness is not finished. There's been no cross exam. So that's what we look forward to tomorrow. Cousin Eddie, tomorrow or Friday, from what I'm hearing, that's what I'm most looking forward to seeing, especially cross exam. It's going to be fireworks, y'all. So anyways, that's the latest from Walterboro. Just a crazy, crazy day. I mean, we had looky-loos that were coming out riding past the courthouse, but ultimately when they didn't block off the main roads in front and on the one side of the courthouse, I thought they're not really super worried that anything's crazy wrong. So that's the testimony from today. I'll bring it back to you tomorrow. Hopefully we have a nice full day of testimony to keep this trial moving. Otherwise, y'all, we're going to be here forever. I'll have a little Christmas tree in the corner right here if we don't keep moving. All right, guys. Hope you're doing well. We'll see you soon.